Hello, I'm Henry Speetman from the Sustainable Cities Collective, and I have with me today Tricia Tunstall. Tricia is the author of Changing Lives, Gustavo Dudamel, El Sistema, and the Transformative Power of Music, released this year by W. Norton. She speaks and writes widely on El Sistema in Venezuela, in the US, and across the world. She's a lifelong music educator as well as a writer. Her previous book, Note by Note, The Celebration of the Piano Lesson, published by Simon Schuster, explores the joys and rewards of teaching piano. El Sistema is a musical education program that was started by Jose Abreu in Venezuela and has since operated successfully for 35 years under 10 different administrations. Over 300,000 students attend its music schools in Venezuela alone. So Tricia, can you talk a little bit about the origins of El Sistema and how music education is being used to fight poverty?
Yes, I'd be happy to. The origins, El Sistema goes all the way back 37 years to 1975, when the visionary that you mentioned, Jose Antonio Abreu, who was both an economist and a musician, formed the idea of having young Venezuelan people come together and make classical music together. Now, at that time, the issue was more an issue of exclusion from classical music because there were only a few orchestras in Caracas or in Venezuela, Venezuela at that time. They were almost completely North American and European composed, and Venezuelans were not having a chance to play classical music almost at all. He wanted to address that by starting his own youth orchestra, which he did, and to everyone's absolute shock and surprise, the orchestra, within 1 year of inception, won an international youth festival in Aberdeen, Scotland. And so
Wow.
suddenly this was big news that Venezuelans could in fact play classical music. And the government was very anxious to support this, the government of the time, that was 1976. And he asked the government to please support his orchestra as a program, but not as an arts program, as a program for youth development. That was sort of his genius idea, one of his many geniuses ideas. And it has been what's enabled the program to really grow and grow and grow during 7 successive regime changes in Venezuela from far right to far left. It's been growing steadily, supported by every government since then, because it's not an arts program, which would have been sort of first to go when budget cuts were made. It's a youth development program. Since that inception, his vision has grown to be not only about making classical music accessible to Venezuelans, but more largely about making the possibility of playing music together in ensemble available to all Venezuelan children, and especially those in poverty. And his key idea is that if children engage in intensive, committed music making together for long periods of time, that will give them an alternative world. And poor children in Venezuela and that's real poverty, who desperately need that alternative world, come to think of the orchestras they're playing in as their true alternative world, which allows them to thrive in many, many ways, thrive psychologically, emotionally, develop new social skills, and most of all, feel that they have a value and a place in a world.
Very powerful idea. So as El Sistema grows across the globe, where do you see the challenges for the program? Does it need top-down oversight, or is the idea powerful enough that it can adapt to local conditions?
I think it's absolutely powerful enough that it can adapt to local conditions. It it grew for 37 years in Venezuela as a government organization, but even and that was funded by the federal government. But even there, many of the music learning centers where they have these children's orchestras throughout the country have their own differing ways of doing things in response to their own regions, whether it's rural, whether it's the barrios in a city. And as you said, El Sistema is spreading very fast across the globe right now. It's become a kind of worldwide movement in thinking about music education or orchestral education as a powerful means of social change. It's never going to look anywhere else in the world the way it looks in Venezuela, simply because that was such a unique circumstance, the way it was born and grew. In the United States, I'd say, and in many places, I'd say the main challenge is funding, because in Venezuela they enjoy this very unusual situation of having a 35-year governmental commitment, federal government commitment to funding this program that is probably the most popular thing that most popular governmental program they have right now. And so it's very sturdy, it's very assured of continued sustainability. Here in the U.S., the way this program has gotten started is very individualistically. A few people in a city or a country place in the country will come together and say, this is so powerful, we need this for our poor and our at-risk children, let's start it. And that's how these things grow in the United States. Committed, impassioned people just sort of getting together and saying, let's start this, and then looking around for how they can fund it. So they have to cobble, in the States, we have to cobble together sort of some foundation support, some private philanthropist support, some maybe a little bit of local government support, that kind of thing. It's very, very challenging. And
so you mentioned funding. So you said that one of the successes of the program was that it was it was sold as a youth development program rather than a musical education program. And do you think that's something that people in the U.S. and around the world can learn from in order to increase the return on investment of community arts programs, given that funding for these kinds of programs are decreasing?
I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so. And we in the United States are learning to talk about it in ways that governments, both local and larger, will understand, which is a real dollars and cents model. I think the most powerful way we have to approach governments is to say, look, here's how much money you would spend on this kid if we didn't intervene. Here's how much money you take a child in a very poor, impoverished part of a ghetto, and who's very statistically likely to end up costing the money, either the city money, either in terms of juvenile detention or arrest and incarceration, huge amounts of money, right? And then to say, compare that with what you'll spend on this child if that child spends 12 years in my music orchestra program. That's a powerful way to talk about it, and we're just learning to do it that way. Musicians and artists don't tend to be very hard-headed and pragmatic about. We tend to want to talk about the beauty of creating something beautiful and the spiritual value of it. But a city council is going to really hear the kind of economic argument that I just made if we can make it well enough.
No, absolutely. I think it's a really powerful idea, and let's hope it continues to receive the kind of support it deserves very much. So, Tricia, thanks so much for taking the time to do this interview with me.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure.
And everybody, please check out Tricia's book, Changing Lives, Gustavo Dudamel, El Sistema, and the Transformative Power of Music, released by WW Norton. Have a great day, Tricia.